Welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kyla Chanel. I'm a performance nutritionist specializing in sex differences in sport. I work with athletes from all over the world through my online private practice and sports nutrition programs. We here at Nutritional Revolution are here to cut through the BS promoted in the media and give you the science, literally straight from the research articles, as well as share client success stories and experiences around nutrition and racing. Please keep in mind, this podcast is created strictly for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis and treatment. If you like what you hear today, we would love for you to subscribe and share. Welcome back, everybody, to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. This is Kyla here, and today we have for you guys Hayley Smith. She is a professional off-road cyclist and Olympian from Canada. Her biggest accomplishments on the bike include an elite mountain bike World Cup podium, a bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games, multiple national championship titles, and winning the inaugural Life Time Grand Prix. Off the bike, she is very vocal about mental health and issues associated with Red S. Hayley holds a master's in sports psychology from Queen's University and is currently a PhD student in the same discipline. This is a fantastic episode with Hayley's background in sports psychology and taking that information to cycling and endurance sports. Enjoy the listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We have for you guys Hayley Smith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to have a good conversation.
Yeah. Where are you logging in from?
I am at home in a small town just outside of Bromont, Quebec.
Okay, cool. What is it? Do you get snow there? Are you getting...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We have a lot of snow.
Goodness. Yeah. Kudos to you. Kudos to you. The California in me is I'm such a loser. Not to do the heat or the cold. Sorry. I'm like, I suck when it comes to snow. Okay. Well, we're going to dive into all things gravel cycling, endurance racing, because that's what we're here to do and we love to learn about it. But before we do, I am going to have you share with us your truths and lie. And I'll let you break them down.
Yes. Okay. So I had to think about this pretty hard, actually, and I'm going to try to deliver them even keeled.
Okay.
1 to 3.
In no particular order.
Yeah. So 1, I am a middle child.
Okay.
2, I have traveled to every continent.
Ooh.
And 3, I hate rice.
Oh no. As an endurance athlete, I mean, you could lean on the pasta and the bagels for sure. Travel to every continent. I could see that being plausible just with where the sport takes you. Middle child. I did not see that in my research. I'm going to go with but also when you say travel to every continent, are there bike races in Antarctica? I don't think so. Maybe that's it. I'm going to go with that one as the lie, but don't tell me the answer. We're going to find out.
All right.
I tried to remember if I saw one of the clips on the Lifetime Grand Prix, YouTube things of did I see her eating rice for breakfast? I don't remember. Okay. We'll find out at the end of the episode. Listeners, hang tight. Does Hayley hate rice or not? Is what we want to know. Okay. Well, why don't you share with us first a little bit, Hayley? What got you interested in just getting on the bike, but then also taking that to longer distances?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been a cyclist, or I've called myself a cyclist for a very long time, since I was 17, I'd say, and I'm 32 now, so it's been a long time. And it started out really as me tagging along with my dad and my brother to specifically mountain biking events. Mm-hmm. And it was really something that I found in recovery from a bad mental illness. So when I was 13, I was diagnosed with anorexia undefined, which was just what they called eating disorders that they didn't know how to categorize at that time. Right. I've since been re-diagnosed with several different things, but an existentially motivated anxiety disorder, and it manifested as food control. Anyways,
interesting.
The bike was really my way of learning to navigate that. It's kind of like my medicine. and that's just, it just snowballed, I guess. So
Mm.
when I was released from the hospital, I started to ride. I would go with my dad and my brother. I was getting to spend time in the woods,
Mm.
doing something that was really challenging. So it was really mentally engaging, and it took up all that sort of brain bandwidth that was
Yeah.
otherwise anxiously occupied.
Mm.
And eventually I found racing, and then it kind of just went stepwise from there, until it became my life.
Yeah. And for our listeners, do you want to share what types of cycling events you've been involved in, just for to wrap their head around the different disciplines and maybe durations and intensities?
So I've really had sort of two different distinct phases of my career. The first 10 or 12 years of my competitive life, I was focusing on XCO mountain bike. So
Mhm.
Olympic discipline, where the race is 90 minutes or so. And then accompanying that with short tracks where the race is 20 minutes. And obviously that's mountain biking. So
Yeah.
kind of like an obstacle course, if you will, on bikes. And then after the Olympics in Tokyo in 2021, I switched to endurance racing. I
Mm.
had dabbled in it a little bit before that, but I made the full switch after the Olympics and started to focus on marathon mountain bike and gravel racing. And that's what I've been doing now for the last 5 years.
Awesome. Did that come with like the pandemic canceling races too? I know that was the case for a lot of people.
A little bit. I mean, I did my first sort of endurance event in 2017. I
Hmm.
did an 8-day stage race in Australia,
Wow.
called the Croc Trophy, and that was where I
Oh,
really
cool.
fell in love with this adventure racing. It was
Yeah.
very similar to Cape Epic, actually. It was eight
Mm.
days, 32 hours of racing, very rugged off road, and we did one or two of those every single year. And
Hmm.
then in the pandemic, with races canceled, I ended up riding a lot more, definitely overtraining. So it
Mm.
wasn't necessarily a good thing, but that did mark kind of the pivotal point where some of it's coincidental. Like I don't think I became an endurance cyclist because of the pandemic, but
Mm.
there were other things happening in my life where that change sort of naturally happened around that time.
Yeah. Cool. So going from XCO and short track, nutrition and hydration, and then to something like because are you in the Lifetime Grand Prix this year for 2026?
Not this year, no.
Okay. Are you going to be doing any of the events?
Yes, I'll be doing Sea Otter and Unbound, but not
Okay.
likely any others.
Okay. When we think of the distances, like Unbound or something like that, like coming from XCO, how has your fueling during sport evolved from something shorter duration to something like Unbound?
Yeah, it's changed dramatically, but I would almost say I would definitely say that's more because of advances in nutrition science as
Yeah.
opposed to switching from shorter to longer. When I
Mm-hmm.
was doing XCOs, they still kind of thought that 60 to 90 grams was the absolute upper limit that a human body was capable of absorbing in an hour. And the formulas I was using were clearly not compatible with my gut, because even at that, I felt
Mm.
sick all the time with
Yeah.
that level of race nutrition. But since I've come to gravel, things have dramatically, as anyone listening to this podcast probably knows, it's dramatically changed in a very short time period.
Yeah.
So even, the first year I did Unbound, I probably ingested 60 grams an hour would be my
Hmm.
guess. And it was not, it was, it was not scientifically or professionally planned out. I think I definitely had 4 Snickers in that first Unbound, and
Yeah.
I had one every 3 hours, and I had a
Nice.
bunch of gels and drink mix, but it was not planned. I did
Yeah.
not know how many grams per hour I was getting.
Yeah.
Whereas now I've learned a lot. I've gone through some major illnesses, and now
Mm.
it's very calculated when I'm on the bike. So
Mm-hmm.
in a race environment, I'm hitting that 100 grams of carbs per hour now, and
Nice.
there are no other. I know that I cannot ingest any other macros without
Mm.
getting sick. So
Okay. So
I
like
have a
strictly
very, yeah,
carbs, no little bits of fat or no little bits of protein, any
no,
of that.
not in a race.
Yeah. And what's your go-to carb source? Like, do you like gels, drink mixes? Like, what works
It
best for your gut?
depends. It depends on the course,
Hmm.
and depends on the course, the temperature, the
Hmm.
humidity, um, and the length, I
Hmm.
think. So, for example, if I were to take a 5-hour mountain bike race that's very single track heavy, like
Hmm.
our marathon nationals usually are, that's going to be all liquid.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, all liquid. But then if I go to unbound, I'm probably going to skew a little bit more to gels, especially in the second half of the race when I just need more water. I just need more.
Mm,
I'm a very heavy sweater, but I'm not a very
yeah,
salty sweater. So I need a lot of just water.
plain water. Yeah. I think that's an important piece of it to think about too. I've talked to many of our guests, but also clients where there needs to be thought around the terrain and what makes sense from a how do you get it into your mouth? Like when do you put
Mhm.
it into your mouth? Is it safe to put it into your mouth? Like are your hands on the bars? Like what is the terrain like? Are you descending? So yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people, maybe listeners, maybe aren't thinking about right now. They're just like, oh, I got to hit this amount of grams of carbs, and it's in my little front pouch. But oh my goodness, it's so bumpy, I can't open that, or it's crumbling, I'm choking, like So,
Mhm.
how do you think about something like that, like for Unbound, for example, where nice rolling hills? How are you thinking about what you want to put on your body or your bike? How are you transporting that in the beginning versus the end? Does it evolve?
It does evolve. So I have a pretty I've done Unbound 4 times now, and I have a pretty reliable system that I use. We divide Unbound into 3 chunks because there's 2 feed zones. So in
Mm-hmm.
phase 1, I always have 2 liters on my back and 2 liters on my bike, and
Mm,
that is always mixed at 60 grams per liter. I like a more dilute solution
yeah.
if possible. So
Hmm.
that's 60 grams per liter. And then I'll do whatever else I need to in gels in my pockets to
Hmm.
make up that 100 grams of carbs per hour. I
Nice.
have tried to push it a little higher than that for myself, and I
Hmm.
don't really seem to be able to get over that 100 grams an hour
Yeah.
barrier. Um, yeah, so that would be phase 1. And then similar in phase 2, and then for the final phase of Unbound, where it's that last 85 kilometers after the final feed zone, I just do hydration on my bike. I get rid of my pack,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still just doing gels. Though every year I have something salty and solid at each of the feed zones in case I want it. It's
Oh,
either like
nice.
a grilled cheese sandwich. One year was an egg McMuffin, like
Cool.
something
Yeah.
something like salty.
Yeah.
Um, I don't always take it, but it's
Yeah.
there in case I need it.
Nice. I like that. I had one person tell us they like needed to have pizza bagel bites. It's like I totally remember those from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to your point, like depending on how the gut's feeling, there could be moments where you crave different things, and having that available can be really helpful and settling on the gut if if it, for whatever reason, it's all you can take in.
Mhm.
With your drink mixes that have carbs in them, are you leaning towards something that has a flavor, or are you going more towards like a neutral, like unflavored product? What do you lean
No,
towards?
I unflavored sweet makes me want to barf.
Yeah.
My brain can't compute it. It
Yeah.
doesn't understand how something could be sweet and not have a flavor.
Yeah.
I no, I just can't. I like sour things. So
Oh,
anything that's
yeah.
really First Endurance has a sour watermelon high carb that I really
Ooh.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so something that's really tart.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good way to mix up the flavor well, flavor fatigue too, with all the sweet stuff, and it cuts it. But also
Mhm.
keeps your, I think sour like keeps your mouth like from drying out too, because you're like
Oh,
it makes your salivary glands like keep producing. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, like
I've never
um
heard it, but it makes perfect sense.
yeah, and if you, I don't know if you've ever experienced this too, like if you think of eating something sour, you can like sometimes if you're really thinking about it, like Sour Patch Kids or whatever it is, you can start to feel your mouth like gearing up like
Yeah.
um yeah, it's just, I mean, the brain mouth connection is very fascinating. But yeah, that makes sense. So the First Endurance sour watermelon, that sounds delicious. And then what gels do you lean on?
I will pretty much exclusive. I've tried a lot of stuff. I
Mhm.
have tried a lot of different products. That's been a benefit of having working with the feed for the last couple years. And this year I've decided to work exclusively with First Endurance.
Mm,
So I'll be using their liquid shots.
cool.
They're only 30 grams, so you have to take a lot of them.
Mhm.
But I do like the consistency. And I think, like I said, I'm someone that I tend to rely more on the liquid, and their high carb is just really good. So
Yeah.
that's the plan for this year.
That's great. With their gels, I haven't tried their gels before. Are they do they have a sour watermelon there too that you go for, or do you mix it
No, they
up?
have, I think they've only got three flavors right now. Wild berry, vanilla, and espresso. So they're pretty standard
Yeah.
flavors. I'm not someone that really tastes my gels in a race.
Yeah.
You just slug it down and then you don't think about it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting you say that. Are you familiar with David Roche? The
Yes.
ultra runner. He was on a podcast recently and he was saying, like, he was walking through his like gel consuming technique. He's like, you just have to shoot it like past your tongue so like you don't even taste it. It just like goes down. I'm like, yeah, that's an interesting technique. Get the calories in. And I guess it like for him it helped minimize, I guess, the gag reflex or getting nauseous and
Mm.
like stomach upset because of the result of the flavor fatigue or something like that.
Hmm.
Um the
For me, it's
experiments.
more just like a time thing. Like you
Yeah.
only, and the longer
Yeah.
you're eating a gel, the less you're breathing.
Mhm.
So you just gotta like squeeze it in and get it down so you can
Yes.
start breathing normally again.
Yes, yes, that's a great point. That's a great point. So you mentioned that you're not a salty sweater. Have you done a sweat sodium test?
I've never done a sodium, like a sweat test. I have
Mhm.
done, the math to determine how much liquid I sweat per hour
Yes.
or
Okay.
volume.
Mhm.
Um, I I don't know that I see the value in it because it changes so much within an individual. And for
Mhm.
me particularly, like I live in winter right now.
Mhm.
Um, so the values I would get right now would be very different
Yeah.
than by the time I'm heat adapted when I go to race Cape Epic.
Yeah.
So particularly as someone who lives in a climate that has four extremely distinct seasons.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I've learned, I know my sensations, and I've learned, I know you can't tell fully based on like salt stains on your kit, etc. But I do know, like, I've experimented with different milligrams per hour. I
Yeah.
know what makes me feel best, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what
Yeah.
and I can adapt to it based on my climate.
Mhm.
But no, sorry, long answer to say no. I've never done a sweat test.
Yeah. No, I think to your point is this is a very similar answer I get from a lot of our athletes that have been doing this for a long time is that you you've experimented so much, but also you know how to listen to your body so well and how to like finesse. And yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. It's like you already figured it out without a sweat sodium test. So,
Mhm.
but not everybody can do that when they're first getting started with something. And yeah, so I think it's helpful for people to hear. And I've even had athletes that are like, even fueling wise, they're like, yeah, I just go by feel. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I have to have a timer, otherwise I will not eat, and then I'm screwed. Um, so yeah, it is. Maybe I'm not the best at listening to my body. Yeah.
Well, honestly, I don't think you can really go by feel in a race in particular
Yeah.
because if you're going by feel, you've already gotten into a little bit of a hole.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm like you. I either use a timer or I use course, um, sort of like course landmarks.
Yep.
Before it's going to get really hard, after it was really hard, before the main climb, etc. Those kinds
Yes.
of things.
Yeah, yeah. On that note, how do you utilize caffeine at all? Like before race, like on race morning or during a race?
I did all last year, and I was I was experimenting, but I was
Mhm.
having about 200 milligrams before the race in coffee, or,
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
close of an estimate as you can get. And then about 200 milligrams in the front half of a race and a top up later on if the race was really, really long. But
Mhm.
I think that caffeine gives me a little bit of difficulty breathing, which is something that I've struggled with for a couple years. So
Yeah.
I suspect that I'll be not using it this year.
Mhm. Yeah. We have had other athletes mention that. And do you also notice like your heart rate drift? Like,
I actually think I feel so good when I have caffeine. Like my heart
yeah.
rate's lower, my perceived exertion's so much lower,
Yeah.
um, but my abdomen gets quite tight and my breathing
Mm.
becomes a little bit shallower, and that's not
Interesting.
what
Yeah.
you want. So
Yeah. Have you, and you don't have to answer this or we can cut it out, but have you ever done any genetic testing to see if you have the Adora 2 gene?
I've never even heard of it.
Okay. What we did in one of my grad school classes, it was nutrigenomics, where they assess like the nutrition genetic interactions. And there are certain genes where people are fast or slow caffeine responders, which I think a lot of people have heard that term. But what they found out is so people who are fast caffeine metabolizers that consume caffeine will actually race faster, but people who are slow caffeine metabolizers and consume caffeine when they actually race slower, which is very fascinating. But if they're a fast caffeine metabolizer but have the ADORA2 gene, that's something that increases anxiety, which in
Oh.
turn kind of like then the pros don't outweigh the cons, I guess, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. So they're like, got one from mom, got one from dad. Now I have like I'm homozygous Adora too, so I'm more likely to like increase my anxiety with caffeine consumption. Um, so that could be,
That lands home. I feel like I
yeah,
need to get, is this something that you can get tested?
you can, yeah. The way I had it tested initially was 23andMe, which I think they're still around. And you can buy that publicly online, but yeah, and then there's like other lab companies where you could get like like a nutrigenomics panel. But 23andMe will sequence your whole genome, which is cool because then you can, when new literature comes out, you can go back and like search your genome.
Oh,
I think that's cool. Some people don't want to like have their genetic information in the hands of somebody else, but
yeah.
to
I'm
each
not
their
worried
own.
about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. They might make a copy of you, but yeah. But I think it's cool information to have, and then it kind of like makes things like make sense, or you know what you should be doing or not doing, maybe, and why. Yeah, why certain things are happening. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, Adora too. If you're constantly fatigued, not recovering despite rest days, dealing with recurring injuries, or watching your performance plateau, no matter how hard you train, you might be dealing with low energy availability or REDS. The problem, most doctors won't run the comprehensive hormonal and metabolic markers you need to actually diagnose this. They'll check basic thyroid and call it a day. Our low energy availability lab panel goes deeper. We're testing free T3, T4 for thyroid function, FSH, LH, estradiol, testosterone for reproductive hormones, IGF-1 for growth hormone status, interleukin-6 for inflammation, plus all your iron stores, vitamin D, metabolic markers, and more. This is the panel that shows what's really happening when your body is underfueled. It's $515 and includes a lab fee through Quest, and you can test as soon as tomorrow. Link is in the show notes, available in most states. Okay, so we talked about kind of actually, and without revealing if this is one of your truths and lies, but what's your race morning breakfast?
My race morning breakfast, so I can't eat gluten.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Are you diagnosed celiac?
I'm not celiac, but this is when I developed my breathing issues a couple years ago. This is one of the things that we found. And
Mm.
I mean, you can't truly test for it, I don't
Yeah.
think, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have a genetic intolerance to it, and
You got to
I get
get that
quite sick.
23andMe test done.
Yeah. Um, anyway, so
Yeah.
my pre-race breakfast is the Bob's Red Mill gluten-free pancakes.
Nice. Yes, that's a good mix. They
Hmm.
did a good job with that.
The secret is that you have to let it rest. So you mix it and then you have to let it rest for 15 minutes before you make the pancakes so
Smart.
that it can hydrate and then get fluffy. Otherwise, they're flat.
Yes. Yes, you're so spot on. I've noticed that when I've been making them as well. I've been diagnosed with celiac like when I was like 17 or 18. And my husband started, now he's has to eat like so he got the bobs, and that is totally so true, because like if I mix it up and then put it right in the waffle maker, it's not as fluffy versus when
Hmm.
you let it sit. That's smart.
If you,
um
I mean, if you have celiac, you probably know this, but gluten-free flours hydrate differently than wheat-based or gluten-based flours. So you can't, you should always let your gluten-free batters sit for a little bit before you cook them.
you're so smart. I did not, having been celiac since I was 17, I have not put that together.
Well, I've read a lot of books on it.
Yeah.
I went full Haley when I had to cut it out. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine like I mean being in the sport for as long as you have, and then the products that were available, I bet like I mean depending on when you were realized that is like, I mean 10 years ago it was probably pretty hard to find stuff that, because everything was like using oats in it, and the oats weren't necessarily processed in a gluten-free facility, and or they're using like a glucose from a wheat, and it's not certified gluten-free. That's kind of like I feel like still like newish in the last 10 years. So yeah,
Mhm.
I can imagine that was difficult.
This was only in the last couple of years for me, so
Mm.
luckily, like this knowledge was all there. And I
Mhm.
have a close friend who was diagnosed with celiac about 8 months before I had to
Oh,
cut it
wow.
out.
Yeah.
So I benefited a lot from her her
Nice.
pain because she
Yeah.
learned all these things. And
Mm.
anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be, it's definitely brutal. But the cool thing is nowadays there's like so many gluten-free brands, and
Hmm.
even traveling too. Like I was super nervous to like go to Europe, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to eat anything. All it is like pasta. There's amazing, like Italy in particular, amazing certifications like all over the place, like fully gluten-free. And they do a great job verifying their, yeah, facilities and
Hmm.
stuff. It's there's more options out there. Um, okay, so pancakes, or you say pancakes or waffles that you like to use? Pancakes, okay. You drizzle in some maple syrup on there, or
Of course.
yeah.
Of course. I look where I'm from.
Yeah,
No, of course. Yeah. And it's not just a drizzle, there's quite a healthy slug.
yeah. Extra that keeps the carbs going. Are you trying to target a certain amount of carbs at that breakfast, or are you just kind of eating to feel on race morning?
No, I don't need to feel on race morning. I know a lot of people get sort of sick before
Hmm.
a race or they're too nervous to eat, but I'm the
Yeah.
opposite. It's like I lose the ability to tell when I'm full.
Mm,
Um, so if I didn't have a plan for race morning, I would definitely overeat and then be
yeah.
sick. So,
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I've definitely heard most people kind of go the opposite. It's like they're waking up earlier than they're used to, and they're not hungry, and they're nervous, and so they don't eat. Are you doing any hydration? You mentioned the coffee, but are you doing any extra electrolytes on race morning for a longer event?
well, I always have electrolytes when I wake up in the morning, every single morning. But and that's not really any different, I don't think, to race day. I try to make sure that I'm really well hydrated and my electrolytes are all balanced, which I can kind of tell based on fluid retention and just how I feel
Hmm.
for the 2 days, well, all the time, but
Yeah.
particularly for the 2 days before a race. And then I have some electrolytes in a bottle with breakfast that morning.
Nice. Are there any common fueling or hydration mistakes you see among maybe other riders or new riders that you know, or new racers?
I think I don't really pay attention so much to what other people are doing when we're out on the bikes.
Hmm.
I think probably most people still under fuel as a general rule in daily life. I think for me in particular, in order to hit the carb targets I need to hit to fuel my training, I've had to decrease pretty drastically the amount of fat I intake. I
Mm,
just ate quite a fat, heavy diet
yeah.
before. So that's perhaps, it's maybe not a mistake, but if people are having trouble figuring out the balance for themselves, then you might have to pull from somewhere else to give yourself more carb
Hmm.
allowance. And that includes on the bike. Like I used to fuel with baked goods pretty much exclusively in
Hmm.
training. And there's just no way that you're actually hitting the carb targets you need. And um, my performance has improved since I've switched to carbs only on the bike.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
What were some of your baked goods that you would go for?
I love to bake. Banana bread.
Ooh,
I was making cookies a lot.
yeah.
Different sort of homemade granola bars.
Mm,
Yeah, different variations on kind of like a loaf or a bread, I think, like
yeah.
banana or ginger molasses or pumpkin or that
Mm,
kind of stuff. But
yeah.
and there's still a place for those certainly, especially
Yeah.
on easy days.
Hmm.
But I can't do that on interval days anymore. I
Right.
wouldn't make it through.
Yes. Yeah. With like talking about kind of pushing the nutrition and potential for GI issues, have you ever experienced GI issues and found a way to navigate it during a race?
Ooh, specifically during the race.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, yeah, I would say so. So last year at BWR Arizona, the Belgian Waffle Ride Arizona, which was the season opener in February, I made a drastic mathematical error
Oh, shoot.
and accidentally had like 230 grams of carbs in the first hour.
Oh, dang,
Um,
go girl.
So I was so sick. Like and
Oh,
I was so distended. My gut was pulling so much water that I couldn't I had to be on the flats on my bars. I couldn't even put my hands on the hoods because I was so
wow.
distended that I couldn't bend over.
Shoot.
Um, so I had to switch to just water for a while, so that
Mhm.
helps. Like basically, you're just trying to manipulate like
Yeah.
osmolarity, osmotic
Hmm.
properties. Um, so just switching to water. I think GI distress can be caused by many different things. Usually for me, it's because I've mistimed things and overdone it,
Mm.
or I've overdone sodium, because both of
Hmm.
those things for me like pull water in and then
Yes.
I get really icky.
Yeah.
And you can fix that by just like slowing down for a little bit. I don't mean you might have to slow your pace down, but more I mean
Yeah.
like slowing down your intake.
Yeah.
Um, and if I'm on the other end of the spectrum, like I've not had enough, I'm
Mm.
unlikely to have GI distress. I'm just more likely to have a bonk.
Yeah.
Um, but thankfully, like the products have gotten so good that this doesn't, unless you make that kind of error where you accidentally do twice what you intended, um, it doesn't happen as much. It doesn't happen
Yeah.
nearly as much.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You make a great point with like the osmotic pressure piece. I think a lot of people still don't understand that. But again, also, I think everybody's tolerance and gut is adapted to a certain amount. So, yeah, playing
Mhm.
with that and learning. In that situation, did you have a plain water bottle on your bike?
No, I stopped at a feed.
Gotcha.
I knew
Okay.
that I
Yeah.
knew that I needed it.
Yeah.
I stopped at a
Yeah.
feed and grabbed one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, 230. That's or was that what you said? 230 or
Yep.
220? Dang. Yeah, that's impressive. It's like
Well, it didn't work. I was
yeah, it
really
didn't
sick. It was just a
didn't
mistake.
didn't work, but it was like probably a gut training session. You could think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. Okay. And then let's see. So what about altitude? So do you live at altitude right now with this?
No, I live at 280 feet.
Oh, whoa. Okay. So when you're doing a race at altitude or going to altitude for a race, do you change your nutrition hydration for the event itself?
Yes, so I think I'm actually probably a good person to answer this because I struggle so much at altitude. I'm
Mhm.
very much a sea level person.
Yeah.
And I really struggle in dry environments. Where I live,
Mm.
the humidity is almost always over 70%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So altitude's a double whammy for those
Yeah.
reasons. Um, I guess basically I have to have just much more liquid. So I
Mm.
have to plan that my fluids will be a little bit more dilute in a
Mhm.
race, but also I need to plan for probably 20 to 25% more volume overall. And
Mm.
that kind of does it. I can hit my carb targets if I can maintain my carb targets if I increase the liquid volume and essentially thus have more dilute solutions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that too when they go to altitude. Sometimes they don't think they're sweating as much because it's so dry, and then they end up under
Hmm.
hydrating. So, yeah, that is a tough one. And then what about for high heat? Like how do you operate in high heat? Do you do any heat training? Do you do any sauna exposure? How do you prep for something like that?
Yes, so definitely I need to prep. I'm quite naturally bad in the heat, I think.
Mm.
I need a full 2 to 3 weeks to
Yeah.
get ready for it. I do use the sauna. So sauna or hot tub, I've used both
Hmm.
in my athletic lifespan, but I try to start at least 3 weeks before the key event, ideally further so that you can have a more relaxed
Yeah.
ramp up of the heat protocol. Otherwise, it has to be kind of intense.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll try to do a heat exposure 5 to 6 days a week post training.
Mm.
It doesn't need to be insanely hot, but it does need to be sort of immediately post training
Hmm.
for 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I prep for it that way, and then I make similar fueling adjustments in the heat. So
Mm.
essentially, just more liquid, but I
Yeah.
keep the sodium and the carb constant.
Hmm. Nice. So sodium stays the same though, even in the high heat with more water?
Um, Yes, I have never noticed a problem for me with that.
Wow, yeah.
I do notice if I can tell when I need more sodium, like it
Mhm.
becomes pretty obvious, but there's
Yeah.
only been a couple times in my life that I can identify where I actually needed to add more salt.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah.
That's great. Yes, that's the interesting thing with like the sweat sodium losses too. Like it does seem like some people are better at sparing and kind of almost like there's a little bit of a recycling process too of the sodium at the
Okay.
skin level. But yeah, and regulating sodium balance. It is some people really let it off and some people can hold it well and keep blood plasma in like a good place. Um, I would love to talk about, so we before we hit record, we were talking about your schooling, and we did get a listener question too related to, I feel like somewhat related, but they asked if you have a mantra that you tell yourself or say when things are getting tough, like in a race, for example. And for our listeners, maybe you want to, before you answer that, maybe you want to brief them a little bit on what your schooling is and if you've taken any nuggets from that into sport.
Yeah, so I'm currently a PhD student studying sports psychology, sorry, and I have my master's of science in the same discipline. Um, but honestly, I think most of my education on the psychology of performance just comes from being an elite athlete, from working with my own mental performance consultant for 10 plus years and going through the trials and the failures and the successes of having a sport career. Um, yeah. So I mean, school has given me some, but life has given me a lot as well, and learning
Yeah.
from my consultant. But I certainly have mantras. They change frequently from race to race, from training to races, through different periods or seasons of life. The one that I found and it's so they're so individual. So I
Yeah.
almost hesitate to share mine because you'll hear it and you'll be like, "What? That's not powerful. Why would you say
Yeah.
that to yourself?" But the one I was using last year was "Remember who you are,"
Mm.
because I had just struggled for quite a while,
Hmm.
for probably, I don't know, 18 months to
Mm.
perform at my own potential, and
Hmm.
so that was a mantra that really brought me into the moment. Like whenever it was hard, just remember who you are. You're someone
Hmm.
that responds this way, you give this
Hmm.
effort, etc. And then another really basic one, well, two more really basic ones that feature heavily in my rotation are "I can do this," or
Hmm.
sometimes in third person,
Hmm.
um, "You can do this, Haley." And I just sort of repeat that to the exclusion of other thoughts when the moments are
Yeah.
tough. Um, and then the final one, it's not so much a mantra as it is more of a reminder, but
Mm.
um, it's just you're doing it. Like I
Hmm.
think when we are faced with these hard moments, like take an interval for example, you're 4 minutes into a 5 minute interval and you want to quit because
Mm.
you think you can't do it, but that's not reality because you are currently doing it. So
I
all
love
you have to
that.
do is do it for one more pedal stroke, and then you do
Yeah.
it for one more pedal stroke, and it just brings you very here. So you
Yeah.
are doing this. Um, Anyways, those are three
I
examples of ones
like
that we
that.
use.
That's really cool. Do you, when you're in a race, are there any tools you use if you ever start to get in your head, like, I don't know, you get a flat or you get like something happens and you get dropped from the pack, or you're just like getting in your head about what kind of like negative self-talk or spiraling? Is there any tools you use then? Or same
Definitely.
ones?
Yeah, I do a lot of prep for races, and these are things that you train over time.
Hmm.
You don't just, craft a race plan once and then you can't expect yourself to be able to, that muscle is not trained. That mental muscle
Yeah.
is not trained if you don't train it. So I do a lot of prep work and I set a lot of task oriented goals, not even
Hmm.
necessarily process goals, but actually task focused goals.
Hmm.
And those are things that I'll return to in the race. So
Hmm.
to use your example, if I have a flat tire, um, I will have planned for that. I will have planned
Hmm.
my response to what the flat tire is going to be, and I'll be
Yeah.
able to lean on that. So I'll know that I'll know where my plugs are. I'll have that rehearsed. I know exactly what I'm going to do in an attempt to fix it.
Mm.
And mentally, I'll return to a mantra that I have set for that, or an intention that I have set for those moments. And it's often triggered by asking myself a question: what do I need to do right now? What can I
Mm.
do right now? And that brings me into a problem solving approach,
Mhm.
like I said, a task orientation as opposed to an emotional response, because you really
Mhm.
don't have time for that. You don't have time
Yeah.
for for emotions in that kind of a
Yes.
situation. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my strategy, but I'm only able to do that in the moment because I have practiced this so much for every single race since I was 16 years old. I've done a race plan that's, I start working on
Mm,
quite a ways before the race that is a rehearsed response to any and all eventualities,
mhm.
good ones and bad ones. Yeah.
So that actually leads me to like a couple of questions. So talking about race day, fueling, all of that stuff, how often are you practicing that in your training? The 100 grams of carbs per hour and the maybe like water or products you want to use on race day. How often are you practicing that, or how far out from the race?
Um, I don't practice it in the off season, so in
Mhm.
the month-long period where we're not actually training.
Mhm.
But outside of that, I am working on that sort of gut training and race nutrition plan, at least once a week.
Mm,
And
nice.
then, so in my long ride or my most intense ride of the week, I'm
Mhm.
hitting those targets. And then anytime I have like legitimate intensity, I'm also pushing up to 90 or 100 grams an hour,
Nice.
just so you can hit the quality in the workout that you
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. Awesome. Are you also practicing your race morning breakfast?
Um, Probably once a week, once or
Yeah.
twice a week.
That's great.
Practicing, I mean, just having
You
pancakes,
just, yeah.
yes.
You want me to eat more pancakes? No problem. I love that. Okay, so when you finish a race, done all that fueling, hydrating, you cross the finish line, what is your appetite like? Or are you trying to get yourself to get in some like recovery nutrition ASAP? You going more off how you feel? What does that first like hour or two look like post race?
So if I'm starving, I've done it wrong. I've done the fueling wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when I cross the finish line, I feel pretty depleted and I'm very tired, but I'm not like searching for a burger immediately. Like it's not the
Yeah.
only thought on my mind.
Yeah.
It used to be because we didn't understand how to eat enough.
Right.
But now I will make sure I have a recovery drink, which is usually about 60 grams in a
Mm-hmm.
bottle of carbs. Sorry, it's like a 4-to-1 ratio. I think of carbs
Mm-hmm.
to protein,
Nice.
and then within an hour I have a real meal. And at that point, I do want some fiber. I want some colorful food, and I want some like fat and salt.
Mm-hmm.
So um, you still have to recover with carbs, but if I've done my loading properly, so I do a bit of prescribed loading for 48 hours before the race. You've done
Mm-hmm.
your race morning and you've done your race fueling well. You shouldn't be in too much of a carb deficit if you look at that whole 3-day period.
Mm-hmm.
You still need carbs for sure, but at that moment, I'm more prioritizing like wholer foods, more balanced macro profile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't like I let my brain have a little bit of a break after I've had my recovery drink. I let my brain have a little bit of a break from optimization.
Mm-hmm. I think that's healthy. Do you this is kind of like a common thing I notice in the after the last race of the season, which makes me the way you just said that made me think of this is like, do you find it helpful? Because we usually there's a body break. You like get some time off the bike. Does that also correlate with less focus on nutrition and specificity to diet, and like you give yourself a brain break from all of those things?
100%.
Yeah.
This was really the 2025 was really the first year that I paid legitimate attention to it and worked with a dietitian
Mhm.
because I had reds and I had to get over it and I
Yeah.
couldn't do that by myself. So we really paid attention to it and I really changed the way I ate. I ate so many more carbs than I've ever
Mm.
eaten in my life, off the
Yeah.
bike in particular. So I knew that I would need to. I've changed my habits.
Mhm.
That's. I don't think you can allow yourself to stop thinking about it if you have really bad habits that you're going to fall back on. And by
Yeah.
really bad, I mean not eating enough. So if you
Right.
are a person like me whose tendency is to not eat enough, then not focusing on eating for performance is
Mm.
not probably going to help you in the off season because you're probably going to revert to restrictive
Right.
things.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that as a caveat.
Yeah.
But this year, I was extremely diligent. I built much better habits. I know how to still fuel recovery now and fuel regardless of if I'm training. So
Mhm.
yes, I didn't really think about um, performance nutrition from
Yeah.
November 1st until January 2nd. Like I didn't really think
Nice.
about it or worry about it
Yeah.
or yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think there's a time and a place to like it's important to take a brain break and give yourself a dedicated brain break because you are so dialed in for so much of the year and there's so
Hmm.
much thought and energy that goes into these things. And I feel like it also like helps you reset, like prevent that burnout, reset and get excited for the
Definitely.
next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, I want to be mindful of your time here. So let's see, I'm going to jump to our lightning round and then we're going to find out which was your lie from the two truths and a lie. So what is your go-to fuel when nothing sounds good?
Annie's gluten-free mac and cheese.
Nice. What's your most underrated piece of gear for a long off-road event?
Ooh, underrated piece of gear, long off-road event. Probably like a thin layer in your pocket. You never know what kind of weather you're going to run into, so an
Mm-hmm.
emergency layer.
Smart. And then what's the best workout for confidence heading into a key race?
I am philosophically opposed to using a workout in close proximity to a race to determine whether you should be confident or not.
Love it. Love it. Okay. And what's one boring habit that you feel like consistently drives your performance?
Boring habit, going to bed early.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Quality sleep. Gotta get that recovery time in.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm going to jump back to your two truths and a lie. So we had that you are a middle child, you've traveled to every continent, and that you hate rice. I was thinking that every continent was the lie. Am I
You
right?
are correct. I have not been
Yes.
to Antarctica. I
Oh,
do actually want to go, but I
yeah.
haven't been there yet.
Sweet. Okay. We've been to every continent except Antarctica.
Yes, race my
Wow.
bike on all of them.
Cool. So you don't hate rice,
I
or no, you do hate
do
rice.
hate rice. I actually really hate rice. It is the greatest displeasure of my life that I now have to
Oh
serve like
no.
subsist on it.
Yeah, shoot. Yeah, you just have to like jazz it up with some stuff maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I'm learning the way of rice, but
yeah.
it's not something that I don't know. Like I don't really hate many foods, but I really don't
Yeah.
like eating rice.
Yeah. Is it a texture thing?
Um, maybe, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
We used to eat um like parboiled rice when I was a kid, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I just like didn't like it as a
Yeah.
kid, and now it's just persisted into adulthood.
Yeah. What about sushi rice? Like if you go out to sushi, do you do that?
I do like sushi, but I like the other stuff that's in the sushi.
Not the rice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's certainly other carb sources out there to utilize,
I
like
miss bread. Bread
pancakes.
was always my favorite. Like I
Yeah.
really miss good bread.
For there's a I don't you I know you can find it online. I just discovered this. There is a company called Queen Street Bakery and they do bagels
Ooh.
and they're gluten free and their ingredients are super clean. Like the oil, there is some fats in it, so it wouldn't be but it's olive oil.
Hmm.
And but the other thing to be mindful of as an endurance athlete is there is fiber in it from
Hmm.
psyllium husk. So, but ingredients wise, it's like still 50 grams of carbs. And then I think there's like 9 grams of fiber, which is a good amount. But the ingredients are really clean, and it's like I know they also do breads and I think English muffins and stuff like that,
Mm.
and pretty good for a gluten free product. So
I'll check it out.
check Queen Street out. I have no affiliation with them. I just discovered them at Whole Foods recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with these. Okay, so what's coming up on the 2026 race calendar for you?
So my first race will be BWR Arizona again, and then I head over to South Africa for Cape Epic.
Cool.
Come back home, race Sea Otter, go back over to Europe, race the Traca, and then end my spring with Unbound.
Nice. Are you doing the
Potentially
Traca
adding Levi's
Spain?
Grand Fondo in there, but I'm sorry.
Are you doing Traca Spain in Spain?
Yes, the
Yeah.
360 in Spain.
Cool. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a packed first like couple months of the year, huh?
Yeah, it's heavy on the volume. The
Yeah.
second half of the year is more mountain bike and potentially a little spicier efforts. But yeah, it's going to be a fun year.
Fun. Awesome. And then where can our listeners find you and follow you?
Mostly just Instagram, so
Mhm.
Haley Hunter Smith. And then on January 14th, I'm launching a pretty exciting initiative, or something that I'm quite excited about. But my personal website will also go live then. And
Nice.
that's a place where you'll be able to follow this initiative, follow my research. So I'll be able to share things that I can't think of the word for right now, the things that I write.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Things
great.
that academic Haley writes
Yes.
will be shared there, and then some race stuff as well.
Amazing. Do you like foresee yourself working one-on-one with patients, or do you want to stay in a research setting like moving forward?
The dream would be to be in a university environment as a professor, but work on the side as a performance consultant. So that's what
Cool.
I'm working towards.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Haley. This has been so fun.
Thank you. Like I said, thank you for asking me. It was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, this was great. To stay up to date with the Nutritional Revolution recent activities, follow Nutritional Revolution on Instagram and Facebook, and sign up to receive the Nutritional Revolution newsletters on the Nutritional Revolution website. If you guys enjoyed today's content, please hit subscribe below to stay up to date on the latest Nutritional Revolution posts. Have a healthy day.